Today, I'm going to be turning the unknown into the well-known and teaching you absolutely everything you need to know about this killer. I don't know. The DVD wiki doesn't know. I honestly don't even think the devs know. He's just this mysterious entity that people don't understand. Everything we know about him is pure speculation. Where did he come from? Where did he get this axe? Where is cross progression? No one knows. It's this creature that can only exist if you think about it, and anybody that tries to investigate it suddenly disappears. Those are pretty much the only things we know about this character from before the entity took it into the trials, but looking closer at his in-game presence, it's clear that he's just meant to be a mimic. He has cosmetics where he's a different gender or a different age. He carries different types of weapons that have all been used to murder, so he's likely trying to portray these tropes. I don't know where the hell he got the idea of a grenade launcher in his neck, but you get my point. The unknown is basically the physical manifestation of an AI-generated character, taking aspects from a ton of data and meshing it together in an attempt to make it look real, and in all honesty, it does a great job. I've never seen a more accurate portrayal of Dead by Daylight players. The unknown is a surprisingly good killer. He may seem pretty simple on paper, but there's actually a ton of complexities to his kit, and I'm going to make sure you know absolutely every single one of them. Let's start with the basics. Like I said earlier, this killer has a grenade launcher in his neck called the UVX. Ever use a noob tube in COD? It's very similar. If you shoot the ground, it'll explode on impact, but if you shoot anything else, it'll bounce once and then explode. This ricochet feature is what skyrockets the killer in terms of skill ceiling. There's going to be some insane angles that hardcore unknown players will figure out in the future. There are a few things that the UVX launcher will do. For one, if you hit a survivor with the blast, they become weakened, which is indicated by this purple thing on the HUD. It's essentially the infected status effect from Nemesis, but instead of having to find a vaccine to remove it, the survivor has to successfully look at you for 10 seconds to get rid of it. If the survivor is already weakened and you hit them again with your UVX, it'll deal a health save. So the only way to injure or down a survivor with your power is for them to be weakened first, again, similar to Nemesis. Pretty straightforward, I'd say. Pro tip number one, if you shoot your UVX at a 90-degree angle, such as where a wall meets a ceiling, it'll instantly explode. And pro tip number two, you can swing almost immediately after canceling your power, so you can bait survivors by pulling out your UVX to make them try to dodge, but then just hit them normally. There's another mechanic that has flown a little bit under the radar, and it happens if your UVX goes through a survivor while it's still airborne. If this happens, the survivor will not become weakened, but they will become hindered for a couple of seconds, meaning they run 6% slower. You still get a noise indication that sounds extremely similar to the noise indication when you actually hit a survivor with the explosion. So if you're confused why it sounds like you're hitting the survivor, but they don't become weakened, it's probably because you hit them while it's airborne, not with the blast radius. The UVX is extremely fun and requires quite a bit of brain power to use well, which I know is hard for you guys, so luckily his secondary ability is better than his primary ability. This goop stuff on the side of your screen is going to slowly rise to about this point on your screen, and once it reaches this point, it'll rise drastically faster until it reaches the top. When it reaches the top, a hallucination is placed directly where you're standing. This cute little guy is, in my opinion, the strongest part about this killer. You can instantly teleport back to it whenever you want, and when I say instantly, I am not joking. It's not like the other teleport abilities where there's a 3-second animation to start your teleport and then another 3-second animation once you get there. You just straight up appear, and it's awesome. After you teleport, every single hallucination on the map will all kind of crouch down and their auras will turn yellow. This means they're disabled and cannot be teleported to for the next 25 seconds. After those 25 seconds are up, you will get a sound cue. All of the hallucinations will stand up and their auras will turn white again, allowing you to teleport. If you teleport, a physical copy of your body stays behind for 5 seconds. So if you do this while chasing a survivor, they might not even know that you teleported. Although this decoy won't have a terror radius or a red stain unless you're using an add-on that we'll get to later. I really appreciate Behavior integrating this insta teleport mechanic into the unknown because it does a great job at creating these scary jump scare moments, and who doesn't love a good old jump scare? You can have up to 4 hallucinations around the map, and a lot like employees in capitalism, the older ones get cycled out for the newer ones. You can kind of control where you place them by either timing it properly, waiting for the bar to fill up, or doing a technique where you constantly spam click your ability to pause the timer. From what I've heard, the community calls this edging. DBD players are very mature. What do you mean? The slowdown from repeatedly holding it out and letting go really isn't that drastic, so edging can be very helpful to just get a little bit more time before it finishes. The survivors can get rid of these hallucinations by going up to them and staring into their soul. If, for whatever reason, the survivor gets interrupted during this animation, they're automatically given the weakened status effect and you get Killer Instinct for 5 seconds. If the survivor's already weakened, the animation takes 25% longer, but that's just like the amount of time I wasted telling you about this, so it's really not that big of a deal. Learning how to properly place your hallucinations is what'll differentiate you from a bad unknown player, so make sure you really focus on good placements. Survivors can see the auras of the hallucinations when they're close to them, so unfortunately, putting them around corners and behind walls is somewhat pointless, but placing them near important objectives like generators or hex totems or this horse will be crucial to your success. Unlike me, this killer is good at a ton of different things. If you want to make survivors rage in endgame chat, take advantage of these strengths. Mobility. I genuinely think that the Unknown has some of the best mobility in the game if you play him properly. The fact that you can instantly teleport wherever you want can be super strong in the right hands. The downside, of course, is the cooldown and the dispel mechanic, but if you know how to set up your hallucinations properly, those two issues tend to go pretty unnoticed. Map pressure. Because of this insane mobility, it's very easy to get from one important objective to the other. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, you can hold a 3-gen without having a 3-gen. Walls. Your balls can hit survivors even if they're on the complete opposite side of the wall, so it forces survivors to loop widely, making it easier for you to catch up. If you're trying to hit a survivor behind a wall, shoot the floor right next to the wall, so it bounces off the floor and then explodes on the wall, rather than bouncing off the wall and exploding in your face. Floors. Same concept, but you can hit survivors through floors from above or below, and make sure you use that 90-degree angle tip from earlier to explode your UVX on impact. Uncertainty. Since this killer can essentially be anywhere on the map in a split second, callouts or aura reading perks might give survivors false or outdated information, causing them to not realize that you're coming from a completely different part of the map, especially if you're using certain add-ons or perks that we'll get to later in this video. Orbitals. Just like Huntress, if you spend a lot of time in customs trying to learn various shots, you'll find a ton of cross-map angles where you can hit survivors before they even know you're coming. Perk synergies. This killer synergizes with a ton of lesser used perks, which is a really nice change of pace. The best category of perks in my opinion would be aura reading perks. I'm All Ears is probably the strongest one. The fact that you can hit survivors through walls and floors makes this perk unbelievably strong. It gives you info on where the survivor is instead of just guessing, so you can get those shots through surfaces. Plus, the survivors have zero way of knowing that you have this perk unless they have distortion. Nowhere to hide. Since the aura reading range follows your body rather than sticking to the generator you just kicked, you can teleport to the complete other side of the map and still have a few seconds of aura reading around where you just teleported to. Nurse's Calling. Since you have a ranged attack and can also hit through floors or walls, no one that is healing near you is safe. Or if they're far away from the wall, you can just do a sick mortar shot. Alien Instinct. Since you can teleport right near the person with the aura and they won't hear you coming. Barbecue and Chili, Bitter Murmur, Darkness Revealed, Discordance, or Friends Till the End to teleport to survivors far away. Floods of Rage for the same reason, but also because if it triggers mid-chase, it can be super strong. And Lethal Pursuer to make any of these aura perks better. The next best category would be stealth perks. Since you can basically be anywhere on the map at any given time, perks like Hex Plaything, Monitor and Abuse, Tinkerer, Trail of Torment, Unforeseen, and even that god-awful perk Hysteria can completely throw off survivors. Then there's the perks that require you to be far away from the hook, like Grim Embrace, Devour Hope, or Make Your Choice, which are good because it's so easy to get away from the hook. And then there's a few other perks that synergize pretty well with him, like Agitation. With Agitation, you can get to a hook quicker, so you can teleport quicker in case you need to pressure a certain area quicker, to down someone quicker, or kick a gen quicker to regress it quicker. Dissolution, because survivors will vault pallets early in an attempt to avoid getting hit with their UVX. Dragon's Grip, because you can kick the gen, leave, and then teleport right back to it if the survivor touches it. Hex Blood Favor, because you can damage survivors from far away, blocking all pallets near them. Pop Goes the Weasel, because you can instantly teleport to a gen to kick it. I wish I could do that with Victor. And Insidious, because you can pretend to be one of the hallucinations and completely scare the survivor. That was a lot of strengths. So here are his weaknesses because we gotta balance him out somehow. Hallucinations. His hallucinations are pretty hard to use. Since it's difficult to control where they're placed, they can be dispelled by survivors in just a few seconds, and they will constantly be changing positions since you can only have 4 at a time, so you'll need to adjust your strategy many times throughout the match. Mobility. If you make one bad teleport, or if the survivors dispel your hallucination near an important objective, you have no other way of getting there besides your half backwards, half forwards feet, and you sure as hell know you don't want to do that. Look at those things. Do you think Quentin Tarantino would... never mind. You always want to make sure every teleport is worth it so you don't have to wait for the lengthy cooldown before you can teleport again. The W key. If you're trying to go for cool shots or trying to use your ability in a loop, you'll undoubtedly run into survivors that just hold W to the next loop. So if you can, make sure that you're only using your power when necessary, or zone the survivor into a position where they will get hit if they try to run away. Alternatively, you could DDoS them so they lag back into the previous loop. Bad collision. Since this is Dead by Daylight, good collision doesn't exist. If you're trying to bounce your UVX off of something, it's very likely that it'll bounce in a completely random unintended direction, so try to only bounce it off of flat objects. Weakened visuals. This might just be a skill issue on my part, but I found it pretty difficult to tell if a survivor is weakened or not if I hit them from far away, and since the sound effect is so similar if your UVX goes through them or if it actually weakens them, it would make for some pretty confusing situations overall, but I could also just be dumb. Once again, we have another killer where the lower the rarity of add-ons, the better they are. Blurry Photo is probably his best one. After teleporting, your full movement speed is recovered faster by 50%. This may not sound great, but you can't swing until you're back up to speed, so this allows you to swing 50% faster after teleporting, essentially making you turn into a scuffed version of Hag and Chase. Speaking of scuffed versions of other killers, how cool would it be for the Unknown to have cosmetics where it's trying to mimic other DBD killers? That would be absolutely fire. His second best add-on is probably Vanishing Box. This makes any survivor that completes a generator become weakened, and this has 3 huge benefits. 1, it's doing your job for you, saving you a ton of time trying to hit the survivor with your UVX, and knowing you, I mean a ton of time. 2, since survivors can only get rid of weakened by looking at you, they have no way of getting rid of it if they're not nearby, which can set you up for some ranged hits, especially for using stealth perks so they don't know that you're coming. And 3, it gives you a ton of information about which survivor is where, because obviously you can see the survivor become weakened and you can see where the generator just got popped. This can be extremely useful if you're trying to find a specific survivor or if you just need general information to change your strategy. Obscure Game Cartridge is another pretty strong add-on. It increases kicking speeds and vaulting speeds by 30% for 20 seconds after teleporting. 20 seconds is a lot, so it gives you an ample amount of time to get use out of this add-on. Eerie OSS Report is really fun, though I don't know how strong it would be. You know how when you teleport, it leaves behind a decoy for a few seconds? Well, this add-on gives this decoy a red stain and a terror radius, as well as making it last for 10 more seconds. This can throw off survivors in chase, especially survivors that are on comms and calling out where the killer is. And hey, they might even think you're DCing. On top of this, it also reduces your teleport cooldown by 5 seconds, which is a whole 20%. This can be an absolute game changer in certain situations. His other Eerie isn't that great in my opinion. It just starts every survivor with the weakened status effect, but it reduces the number of hallucinations you can have from 4 to 3. In my opinion, having that extra hallucination is way stronger than having every survivor weakened at the start of the match, because it'll allow you to have more consistent output throughout the duration of the trial. And the rest of his add-ons are kind of just boring status effect add-ons, but there are some interesting ones that you could potentially get some use out of, like Device of Undisclosed Origin, which causes survivors near your hallucinations to become oblivious, or Serum Vial, which does the same exact thing but makes them exhausted instead of oblivious. Overall, I think the best combo would be to run the brown and the green one, because they make your power significantly stronger and you'll likely have a bunch of them. The Unknown comes with 3 decent teachable perks. His first one is Unbound, which activates for 30 seconds when a survivor becomes injured. While it's active, if you vault a window, it gives you a 5% haste for 10 seconds. This perk is decent if you're trying to catch up to a survivor at a strong loop like Shack or a long wall, but I'm just not a huge fan of the prerequisite of injuring a survivor to activate it. If you injure a survivor, they're gonna get a ton of distance to get to another loop, and if you're not playing a killer with good mobility, there's a chance that it might take the whole 30 seconds to even catch back up to the survivor. I think this perk would work better if it had a cooldown rather than a requirement, but the cooldown would probably have to be pretty hefty to prevent this perk from being overpowered. The next perk is called Undone. This perk is just straight up bad, but if you dedicate your whole build around it while also going against bad survivors, it could be really strong. It basically requires survivors to miss skill checks to get any sort of value, and any perk that's relying on the survivors to do something is usually going to be bad, so this is no different. If they fail a skill check, Undone gains 3 tokens up to a maximum of 30 tokens. If you kick a gen, it applies all of your tokens to that gen, instantly regressing it by 1% per token and blocks the gen for 1 second per token. So for example, if the survivors miss 4 skill checks, 4 times 3 is 12, so the next time you kick a gen, it'll instantly regress by 12% and will be blocked by the entity for 12 seconds. After it becomes unblocked, it'll continue regressing. On paper, this seems like a decent gen regression perk, but in practice, it's terrible. Survivors with more than 50 hours on the game won't miss skill checks, and even if they do, it'll be few and far between, so you'll maybe get like 9 tokens throughout the match. If you dedicate an impossible skill check build around this perk, maybe there's a chance for you to get some value out of it, but impossible skill checks really aren't that hard to hit if you know what you're up against. And his last perk, which is my favorite one, Unforeseen. This is essentially a side grade to Trail of Torment, and I love Trail as a concept, but this one is scarier because it doesn't tell the survivors that it's active. When you kick a generator, your terror radius gets transferred to that gen for 30 seconds. This perk is great on any mobility-based killer because it basically allows you to go undetectable whenever you want. I absolutely love killer stealth perks because it makes this game so much scarier, and this is another great addition. Once you learn how to use the Unknown's power properly and know the ins and out of his kit, I would say he could be a potentially A-tier killer. He has a ton of strengths and very few weaknesses. Overall, I'd say this killer is medium difficulty with a pretty low skill floor, but an infinitely high skill ceiling, just like Huntress. Another successful killer and a very fun one to play as and against, so props to Behavior. This is a rare occurrence. If you want to see more DBD how-to videos, drop a like so I know you find them helpful, and come check out this playlist on screen.